Good evening. Welcome. My name is Emily Summer. I am the book buyer here at East City Bookshop, and welcome to everybody. Thank you for being with us this evening. An especially warm welcome if this is your first time visiting us. Thank you. We are glad you're here. Welcome back if you've been to our events before, and welcome to the people who are watching us via Zoom webinar. We are very glad that you are with us as well. Before we get to tonight's conversation, I have just a couple of housekeeping notes. There will be a time for audience questions at the end of the conversation, so please hold any questions until then. And we're in a small enough space too that we'll ask you to ask your questions without a mic, and then David will repeat the question for Josh so that our friends watching on Zoom can hear. They'll stay in the loop that way. If you need a bathroom, they are upstairs past the register and our greeting cards. And more importantly, if you still need a copy or multiple copies of Early Thirties, those copies are upstairs as well. If you have attended or tuned in to any of our literary fiction events in the past, you may have seen me do an introduction like this, and you'll know that I always say that because I am the buyer, not the events manager, I only show up to introduce the books that I really enjoy. That's true. I was initially intrigued by Early Thirties comparisons to the novels of Dolly Alderton and Gabrielle Zevin, as well as the temptation to relive my own early 30s from my current position in my late 40s. Having finished the book now, I can confidently say that these great comparisons are apt and fair, and that a book about friendship, especially one this funny and this touching, is a great read no matter what decade you're in. Josh Duboff is a novelist, journalist, and playwright. A former senior writer for Vanity Fair, Josh has written cover stories on Taylor Swift, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Gigi Hadid, among others, and contributed to the New York Times Book Review, the Wall Street Journal Magazine, Harper's, GQ, W, Town and Country, Bon Appetit, and more. A graduate of Yale, he lives in New York City. And in conversation with Josh tonight is David Litt, the New York Times bestselling author of Thanks, Obama, Democracy in One Book or Less, and the forthcoming It's Only Drowning. A former senior speechwriter for Barack Obama and described as the comic muse for the president for his work on the White House Correspondents' Dinner monologues. He has also written for the New York Times, the Atlantic, the Washington Post, the LA Times, Cosmopolitan, and more. Raised in New York, David and his wife now split their time between here in Washington, D.C. and Asbury Park, New Jersey. And if you'd like to pre-order David's book, It's Only Drowning, which comes out on June 24th, we can take care of that for you tonight up at the register. David and Josh, thank you again, and over to you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having us, and thank you everyone for being here, and also all the Zoom people. Hi, Zoom people. Well, first of all, let me say, so Josh, I don't know how many people in our audience know this, but so the two of us went to college together. We were the same year in college, and so my biggest question for you about this book is which characters are based on which people who we know, and what gossip did you leave out of the book? I'm not going to ask you that now, but I just want you to think about it for later. In the meantime, I want to actually start with, because I do think we were talking about this in the green room. I don't think we've seen each other since college. So that's a very good way of
Yes.
saying, let's talk about how you ended up here,
Yes.
talking about your new novel. So you started, I mean, for most of your career, you were a journalist interviewing celebrities, right? Tell me a little bit about that, but also when you're sitting down and talking with a celebrity, how do you unlock that? What are the questions that really get somebody to open up?
Yes. So, well, first, before I start, I just want to thank you for being here with me tonight. It's a very special thing to get to do this and have like a reunion of sorts in this venue to talk about the book. It's very special to me. So I'm very, it's exciting. I, let's see. I think when I'm interviewing someone, it's interesting, and I'm curious how this is going to shift now that so I worked at Vanity Fair for 6 years, interviewed a lot of people, was in some surreal, strange situations, all sorts of rooms that kind of took a second to kind of adjust to what was going on, as I'm sure you can relate for some of your career moments as well. And I found it sometimes challenging to talk to these people that were very famous, people I'd been listening to their music or watching their movies my whole life, and trying to find a way in or a way to kind of understand them as humans. And what I always kind of came back to as sort of my central tenet maybe was when I'm interviewing someone or talking to someone, what's kind of the public versus private dichotomy there. So if this is someone that, we're all consuming their Instagrams, we're consuming their music, we're consuming their red carpet coverage, we have this kind of sense of what they're like. What am I, as someone interviewing them, sitting across the table from them at a restaurant, noticing just in terms of how they engage as a human and they engage as a friend, as they engage as, what's on their iPhone, what are they doing that night for dinner? Um, that was kind of always my kind of initial framework, I think, was kind of just trying to understand what makes this person tick, and how is it potentially coloring or in some way at odds or aligned with the way we might see them kind of in a public sphere. So I think that was kind of my approach. And then I also, on top of that, I think I just kind of always liked talking. I feel like I always would try to take a very conversational approach. I think I was always very interested in just kind of like, I remember I was interviewing Jenny Slate for something, and I was like kind of nervous because I think she had like just broken up with someone, and I knew I was gonna have to like get to this awkward moment in the interview, which we all kind of are aware of, I think maybe a little bit, where you kind of have to ask them the tough question about a breakup or a scandal or something. And she was just so forthcoming and funny that it made it easy. But I remember I started sharing stuff about my own life, and I remember just starting to feel like, oh, this is really nice. It's almost like we are just vibing as people and humans, and because sometimes the dynamic can feel so sort of uncomfortably manufactured, or somehow kind of there's a stiltedness to it. So that was kind of like an unlock for me, I think, too, where I was like, oh, this is just kind of like, just try to talk to these people, and like I think that was really helpful for me when I was thinking about how to interview.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, so I want to get to the book. So first, let me ask, just quick show, how many people have read the book already? Okay,
Oh
great.
wow, we've got a good
We're-
portion.
All right.
Yeah.
And then how many people are planning on purchasing one or more copies of the book later
I
to
hope
read it?
even the people who have read it should
Yeah,
be saying yes to
everybody.
that. Come on.
Thank you.
Okay. Everyone's
Um,
buying one. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so tell me about how this, I mean, really, that does sound like a dream job for, to me, it sounds like very anxiety causing,
yeah.
but to the kind of person for whom that's a dream job, that seems like a dream job.
Yep.
And it led you to this book, which is also about somebody working as a
Yes.
interviewer of celebrities.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that journey. How did this happen?
So I think, so yes, I was at the magazine for about 6 years. It's interesting. This is something that I probably realized after the fact, but I think the whole time I was there, I loved my work. I loved writing celebrity profiles. It was exciting. It was fun. It was challenging. I also felt like I was constantly finding ways though to like push, uh, like my fiction writing itch, even within the constructs of like journalistic kind of construct. So I think I um I remember writing these kind of, or Graydon Carter, who was the editor, had this idea of like Bill de Blasio. This is getting into your terrain, actually, political humor, but it was like diary entries from the perspective of Bill de Blasio, but obviously fictional. I'm not Bill de Blasio, believe it or not. That's the big reveal of this whole event
Yeah,
tonight.
spoilers.
But I
yeah.
wrote for a year and a half every week a diary entry as if I was Bill de Blasio, and they were anonymous. Actually, I forgot this is like going online or something.
Yeah.
But
The Zoom people know.
yeah, the Zoom people now know. But it was so fun, and we had someone illustrating them every week, and it was like I was trying to get into Bill de Blasio's head and like making up his kind of like interesting like dynamics in his and I was like, oh, this is kind of like, it was like scratching some itch that I feel like I didn't even necessarily realize I had. I'd written a play and a web series before I was at Vanity Fair. I always kind of thought maybe I would wind my way back there, but I think there's always that kind of pulsing kind of thing within me that was like, I want to kind of, I don't know, let my imagination run wild a little bit more than you can when you're just trying to capture what just a real person is actually like. So yeah, there was something in me that I think was always kind of like, I'm going to someday do something like this. And so I left in 2019. I don't think I initially thought, oh, now I'm going to write a novel about my time there. It wasn't like that, a direct of a correlation, but I definitely immediately started trying to process it through writing, which is something I've always gone back to in my life. And I started writing actually like personal essays, and just sort of about experiences I had had, my time there. And I remember sending them to my agent, and he was like, there's some really exciting, great stuff in here, but have you given yourself permission to think about
Mm.
going into the fiction lane with these? And have you thought about how that might feel and what that might feel? So I was like, okay. And so I feel like I'm so thankful to him for saying that, because I don't know if I would have gotten there on my own.
Yeah.
And I might have just tried to like shop around a book of personal essays potentially. And it felt so exciting and freeing and invigorating once I kind of opened that up for myself. And then it became this, which was like a kind of unexpected outcome from kind of letting myself think about, oh, what was these years like at this kind of interesting, unusual job that I had?
Yeah. Um, and as we talked about some of the comparisons in your introduction, but for you as a writer, who are your kind of influences, or when you read your own book, who are you hoping that you say, oh, this sounds like?
Oh gosh, yeah. So I have to say, and I could only wish to ever be compared to her because I think she's a genius. But Jennifer Egan's A Visit from the Goon Squad, which I read. I don't know how many people have read it, but what 2011, 2010, 15 years or 10 years ago now. I remember reading that book and being like, there was something about, for those of you who read it who know, it's like she starts with one character and then she follows the thread of a character that you may have seen in a minor moment in the previous chapter and not realized you were going to get their perspective later on. And she keeps kind of following different threads like that throughout the book. And for some reason, and there's like a chapter that's told in PowerPoint slides at the end, and I was like, wow, she's kind of there's a daringness somehow to like how she's structuring this book that I hadn't quite encountered before. And I think that really did change how I was thought about literature. I thought about like, if I was going to write a book someday, what would it look like? And for those of you who read the book, like there was actually, believe it or not, even more kind of playing with mediums. I had like a text message chapter. I had for Valentina, the actress character in the book, I wrote like 100 of her tweets. Like I really tried to like get into these people's heads and how they would use social media, how they would do their own writing, and some of that stayed in the book. So like I have this podcast transcript or two in the end, and like I kept some of that. So anyways, that book definitely in her writing. Also, the Elena Ferrante books. I took a really long time to read the Brilliant Friends series. I know like everyone was kind of, I feel like I was late to the game with that. And then probably right before COVID, beginning of COVID, I did all four like really quickly. And like the core friendship of this book, Zoe and Victor, where they're kind of trying to understand their relationship to each other, what they mean to each other. They potentially are falling a bit away from each other and kind of finding their way back to each other. That was something that I feel like the complicatedness and the kind of way its friendships can ebb and flow, she does so brilliantly. And I just remember those books being like, oh, wow, this is like a deep dive on a friendship. I was in heaven.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about that sort of central friendship for a second. So I think it's pretty clear where the Victor character came from, right? I have a guess, but so was this a sort of autobiographical novel about a friendship, or is this kind of an amalgamation? How did you decide, all right, this is a two-hander, right? How did you decide
Yep.
who the other hand was as a character?
So it's interesting, as I was alluding to, where I started with the personal essays. The book initially, when I was when I got into the like, I'm going to write a novel mindset, was still going to be a little bit more just the Victor's journey, this one character, and sort of his navigating the weird world of a celebrity magazine and what it's like to be a journalist and all the kind of wild, kind of exploits he was getting himself up to. But then I think, and I honestly think someone asked me this recently, and I was like, oh, I hadn't really quite put this all together, but I actually do think it had something to do with that when I was really kind of getting into things. It was the beginning of COVID. And I think I was thinking a lot about my like social sphere and my dynamics with my friends and kind of missing them and feeling like I was in this early 30s period at that time of like people starting to like have families and moving to different places. And I was feeling kind of like I was missing people who I saw all the time in a weird way. Like I was feeling people were changing a lot. And it didn't feel that way to me in my 20s. And I think I was like, you know what? This is something I'm so fascinated by. I care a lot about. It's something that I find complicated and confusing and distressing at times, and exhilarating at others. And I thought this is what I want to actually like dig into. So it kind of shifted, and Zoe became a much bigger character, his best friend. Also, the gay male straight woman friendship is something that I don't feel um it's like you definitely see it as like a comic motif in a lot of pop culture items and books, but the idea of that being like the central friendship that we were looking at here felt to me also very exciting to kind of get into. It's a very important relationship in my life, the dynamic that means a lot to me, and I felt like that was kind of exciting also. So I think those were the kind of, I don't know. So then I was like, I want to write this friendship book. I think that's what happened.
No, it's funny. Reading it, I kind of felt like, in a way, the thing that kept coming to my mind was like, this almost was like the 10th season of Friends, right? Like,
Yeah. I love that.
and sort of with like
Yeah.
kind of bittersweet 10th season of Friends. And so but so when you're, I was, this just popped in my head, but something that didn't occur to me, when you're writing a novel and you're a sort of fictionalized character in that novel, how do you decide what to name yourself? Or what
Oh,
to name the main character who is strongly
yeah.
based on you?
Okay, so, well, it's interesting. I didn't give it as much thought as you might think to be like, oh, what's his name gonna be in like it kind of was always Victor. I don't know why. And I really wish I had a better answer. Like I was like watching like like a sign for like a high like sky, it was appeared in the sky above me or something. It wasn't anything like that. But I do feel like there was nothing. I'm trying to think. The only thing that I ever did character naming wise that I feel like this is so crazy to say, but like Taylor Swift, I don't know if I think as if everyone knows this. It's like an insane arcane Taylor Swift fact.
Try me.
But she put the names of Blake Lively's kids in one of her songs.
I did not know that. Yeah.
Okay. So I did put like a few of my best friends, their kids' names in the book, usually for minor characters. I actually don't know if I've said that anywhere yet. Yeah, I know one of them isn't the most flattering character, the name choice, but my friend was still so happy, and her 7-year-old is like, I'm famous, and apparently has been going around her school pointing to her name in the book.
That's really
so.
That's very
I'm
adorable.
very like happy that that's a byproduct of that choice. It's interesting though. This isn't exactly what you were asking, but like someone said this. Like obviously I was asking for the comparisons to my real life. This guy's a gay guy in his 30s. He works at a Vanity Fair-esque magazine. It's like, yes, okay. So it's a very obvious sort of one-to-one corollary thing. I do feel like, honestly, this is so weird. Now, especially with a little more distance from the book, I relate more to Zoe in a lot of ways, which is like strange to like, I feel like I've said that to a few people and they're like, what? You're just like saying that or what? Yeah, no, but it like really is something about her, like, I don't know, like she's like the pragmatism of like, I'm on this path, but actually like I'm out and like gonna try something different and kind of like get out of this relationship, get out of this job. Like I need to like kind of pivot and like not talk to anyone about it really and just kind of do it and take that like chance on myself without even maybe understanding all the reasons that are like the engine for it. That is something that I was like going through at the time and feel. And sometimes I'll people will like send me screenshots of like Victor's spirals or anxiety moments in the book. I'm like, that's not me anymore, even though it kind of is. That's only wishful thinking actually on my part. But I definitely do some of like that feels like not quite. It's like there's aspects of me in both. I made them both up, but like
yeah, that seems like the whole point of you get to make them both up, so you can be as much or as little of either of them as you like. And so one of the things that interested me about that too is because I do think that this idea of what is success, right, is a huge part of the book for both of the two main characters and kind of sprinkled throughout. And so how is your understanding of what it means to be a successful person in the world? How's it changed from your early 30s when you were working on the book to now?
Ooh, I love that. This is like a therapy question almost. I feel like
I charge by the
I
hour.
know. I was gonna say that was I my own. I definitely feel like I feel like I put a lot more emphasis now in my life in like the things that like people that make me feel good, like things that make me feel good. Like just kind of if I'm gonna spend, I'd rather spend like I feel like in the past maybe I was a little more oriented around like markers from other people that were like, this is you've made it when you've done X because of like this weird societal, I don't know, all different factors. And I think that it was often like I felt like I was like, trying really hard or working really hard on something, and I'm like, why? Like there wasn't necessarily like a good reason I could answer. We were talking, like people have asked like, oh, like why do you write a book? Because I really wanted to do this. Like it felt like something very important to me. Like this is like these are characters I like became obsessed with, and I think it felt like I had no choice but to write it, and I feel like that feels like very meaningful to me in a way that maybe in other times in my life I was like, why am I like tearing my hair out for like something that isn't, I don't know if you can relate to this at all, but it's like there's things that I was like maybe not necessarily clear on where my head was at or why I wanted the thing I was going for.
And so I want to talk about the structure of the book as well, because I had kind of thought of it as like a Love Actually structure, or I don't know if you've seen the old movie Dinner at 8.
No, I
Uh,
haven't, but now I need
I
to.
highly recommend
Dinner
it.
at
Yeah,
8.
but
Okay.
and I
I
was
love
like,
that title.
Love actually stole this idea from dinner, or I think it's Dinner at 8.
Dinner at
Anyway,
8.
but and for those who haven't read the book yet, before you buy your many copies and read the book, that we're not just following different characters, but we're
Yep.
in their heads, right? We have the
Mhm.
different points of view at different times. So first of all, what made you decide that that's how you wanted to approach the book?
I think I definitely wanted to broaden the world a bit. That was sort of, I don't know if it was so concrete that I'd be like, I want to broaden the world, but I think I definitely, it sometimes like takes me out of a book if I feel like it's like I mean, don't they have other friends or don't they have other people that they interact with? Like it's always like one person talking to one person the whole book, and I'm like, oh, okay. Because like I just feel like it helped me to think about, at least for a few other characters, to get into their heads, to see like how Victor and Zoe would like fit into the greater kind of context of the community, whether it be professional or social. That, especially because Victor works at a magazine, I felt like it was helpful to me to kind of show how the celebrity he's interviewing would view someone like him, or how like a potential kind of frenemy rival fellow writer might view him, or like I don't know, just like it helped me kind of understand him more too sometimes. And I think that some of it we cut. I think like my editor was so helpful with that, because I had so much. I felt like I don't know how many of you have seen like Homeland, but like when Carrie Matheson has like the string on the
That's
index cards, I
that
felt like I was
never
losing
gets
my
out of
mind a
one's
little
eye.
bit, because
Yeah.
I had so much material at one point, and I was like, this all. I kind of was like, so I was like really bad at cutting things. My editor was very helpful, but I think, uh, yeah, I think it just kind of was. It came from a place of like trying to get to understand them more, and then a lot of it was like, oh, this kind of was also back to the visit from a Goon Squad thing. I would just literally find myself interested. I'd be like, wait, like I want to go back to that. But like I just like, wanted to kind of like follow these characters if I felt like there was something in them that I felt like was unfinished, or that was kind of would flip its the other side of the coin type thing, where you were like, okay, now I'm like understanding maybe this wasn't quite as obvious or straightforward as it might have appeared in the
Yeah.
previous chapter.
I also realized I did something like that I'm pretty sure will get me fired as an interviewer slash therapist, which is we haven't really talked about what the book's about.
Oh yeah.
So why don't we take a quick intermission and tell us without any spoilers, and we talked about some of the characters, but for people who haven't read it yet, how would you describe what's the sort of,
Yeah.
the short version of
So
the book we've been discussing for half an hour?
I know. Oh yeah, we didn't do it. It also occurred to me I didn't do it. I usually read and I didn't read.
I was gonna ask if you
Yeah.
wanted to do that,
Well, but
so if you
a
want
lot
to,
of you have read
please
it.
do.
But I do feel like so it's about. I used to always say to people, it's two best friends who have like a falling out, which actually doesn't feel like the right. Especially now I've been talking about the book more. I'm like, I actually don't know if that's how I would describe it anymore. But it's about two best friends in their early 30s have a, let's say, like a complicated moment in their friendship, and at the same time as they're both trying to understand their professional, romantic, personal goals in life, and sort of how they relate to each other as they're going through that inner kind of introspection.
And do you want to turn it over to the audience vote to see if you should read?
Oh, okay.
How many of you would like
So
a
you're
show
a
of
mid.
hands?
Oh,
How many of you
okay.
would like Josh?
All right, we're gonna do a mid reading.
Okay.
Wait, I like
Yeah,
this
let's
actually.
do
It's
it.
kind of like I don't know what do you call this? It's sort of like it's not an intermission, because that would mean everyone gets a pause.
Yeah,
But
no one leave.
yeah, this is not a moment to take your phones out, and I don't know. Actually, sure, take your phones out. Okay. So this is this actually, and this answers the question I think pretty well. Actually, it just so happens that this passage kind of gets a bit at the core, I think, hopefully, of like the dynamic. Okay. It's the beginning of chapter 4. Zoe. This doesn't feel very wedding. What would make it more wedding? Victor was on his phone, gazing intently. It was impossible to know what was holding his interest. Victor. He looked up at her in a strained, almost agitated manner. His lips pursed. You can't be on your phone. I'm getting married in 2 hours. Zoe fell back on the bed in her hotel suite. The bedspread had a garish yellow and purple floral pattern to it and a musty smell. Zoe was wearing purple spandex shorts, brighter than the bedspread purple, and Victor's faded US Open t-shirt. Zoe's wedding was taking place at a beachside resort in Cape Cod. Tom's family had been coming here regularly since Tom was in high school. Zoe was not a fan of tchotchkes or the sand, and there were tchotchkes and sand everywhere. Unfortunately, we don't have a choice, Tom had mumbled when they were discussing their wedding venue months ago. We don't? She'd asked. My mom won't come to the wedding if we don't have it here, he said. Zoe had restrained herself from reminding Tom that her parents were paying for the wedding, But since her parents lived in the city and they saw them all the time, or at least she saw them all the time, Tom invariably had a conflict. It went unspoken that for their wedding, they'd let Tom's mom have this one. When Zoe told her mom that they were having their wedding in Cape Cod, her first question was, "Can you get taxis there?" Victor got up from the bed in Zoe's room and placed his hands on an espresso machine, unmotivated to try to figure out how to turn it on. "I should just sleep in here with you tonight," he said with a sigh. "I don't like my room." "You can't stay with me on my wedding night." Victor turned to look at her. "Why not? Because you want to fuck your husband?" Zoe couldn't help but grin. "Enough. We should be proper today." "No, we shouldn't." Victor moved back to the bed and lay down next to her. He was in flannel pants and a black hoodie. It was mid-August and 85 degrees outside, but if Victor hadn't been in a hoodie, Zoe would have known he wasn't okay. In the midst of all her wedding planning, she'd occasionally had the thought that she wasn't being present enough for Victor, but she felt less worried about him knowing he had his job at Corridor now. He had his new friends, like his coworker Maya, who was now regularly featured on his Instagram story. Victor was trying to keep her in the loop, she knew that, but she often found herself zoning out when he would tell her his work stories. The other week, he'd recounted a long narrative about a conflict with his editor, and she realized she'd mistakenly thought for months that his editor's name was Liam. It was Leon, she'd been close. None of this mattered so much to the core underpinning of their friendship, she felt. It's not like Victor asked her anything so detailed about her job. She could sense his losing focus whenever she spoke about Perry or Louisa or Kiki. "You're right," Victor said. "Today really doesn't feel very wedding." "Remember how I always said I was going to go the Carolyn Bessette route for my dress?" she said. "Yeah, you didn't come through on that one." Zoe's wedding dress was frilly with big fabric-heavy shoulders. She wasn't totally sure how she had ended up with it. The truth was, she hadn't wanted to spend much time on any one item related to her wedding. Once she had a dress that seemed satisfactory, she moved on to the flowers. "Talked to Tom's cousin for a weirdly long time last night," Victor said. "I feel like he's..." "Don't say it." "What?" "He's not gay, Victor." Victor opened his mouth in mock outrage. "I was not going to say that." "What were you going to say then?" "Not that." "He's like 23. He's 26, actually. He's applying to law schools now." Zoe stood up and moved to her dresser. She'd already had her hair done. She was going for simple, easy waves. She'd used a picture of Elizabeth Olsen she found on her Explore page as inspiration. She'd opted for low-key hair since her dress was ornate. That was how she was approaching much of her life at the moment. She felt a great need for balance. If she was overcome with stress when leaving her office, Perry asking unreasonable questions, Kiki throwing her under the bus, she would get off the subway and immediately head to Van Leeuwen for ice cream. If this approach to living felt simplistic, Zoe felt confident that many solutions really were usually that simple. Most people overcomplicated things. "Be honest," Victor was saying. "No joking, no bullshitting, nothing else. Is this, like, are you happy today? Is this what you always dreamed of? Do you feel like, the princess, the Julia Roberts or whatever?" "I don't feel like the Julia Roberts or whatever. No, I guess I..." Something about the way Victor had asked the question felt grating, but she tried to move past it. Did anyone really want to be asked a tough question 90 minutes before her wedding? And she knew Victor actually wasn't sure, that he really did want to know the answer. "I think it's too hard to assess while it's the day of." He did not look at all satisfied by this response. "But yeah, of course. Of course I'm happy." My reading. Also, Perry is one of my best friend's daughter's names. So actually, that's not necessarily the most flattering character to be named after, but it's exciting for her nonetheless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Particularly, I feel like, at a certain point, they might get older and be like, let's read.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe in 10 years, she'd be like, "Wait, why did you name me after like the tyrant boss?" But for now, she loves it.
Right, you have time to come up with a good answer to that question. So I wanted to, and one of the things I really enjoyed about the book and I thought was just interesting is, so obviously, I think it's not a spoiler to say that the person Zoe's marrying is not like great, or doesn't, or at least at that moment, I was like, this guy doesn't seem great. But then later on, you do a chapter that was kind of from his perspective, and I didn't come away thinking, oh, he's great, but I did come away thinking like, oh, he's a person, right? And in a way that I thought was very artfully done, and like, could it, one of those things where if it had been done poorly, it would have been very obvious how poorly it was done. And it wasn't. It was really like, you were like, oh, I really get a sense of who these people are. Which leads me to my question, which is, were there any people, or which people in the book did you find it most difficult to sort of inhabit and write from their point of view?
That's a good question. And no one, I feel like I, oh, okay, it's interesting. Tom does come to mind, that which is always husband. But I really pushed myself to uh I feel like this is how I kind of approached all the characters in the book. I was trying to approach everyone from like a generous, empathetic perspective. It's been funny. We were talking about this back there. Like a few people have said to me things like, "Oh, it's like a book about these kind of like toxic White Lotus-y people." And I was like, "Yeah, like I guess." But I was like, I don't know what it says about me that I like kind of love them all. So I'm like maybe something's like wrong with me. But like I think I don't think of any of them as necessarily like unlikable, quote unquote, but I think Emily and I were talking about this back there too. Like I think those are the characters I'm always kind of like most drawn to, the ones that maybe would be deemed as unlikable by others. So I think Tom was maybe like it was important. That was one where I was like, I knew from the beginning I was going to try to write a chapter from his perspective because I felt like I like I don't know, it felt like that was like an exciting like prospect to me, to kind of like someone that you've written off in life. I feel like this has definitely happened to me, and like I do kind of understand there's something I don't know about them, or there's something like backstory wise where like later, like even years later, my friend would be like, "Oh, remember that guy I used to be dating?" And she's like, "Did you know he was like XYZ with his sister?" And like I was like, "What?" Like it does kind of like change your just understanding of them in a way, and it doesn't necessarily, as you said, like make you suddenly love them or wish that your friend was still dating them, but like it can just kind of, I've definitely had that experience more than I realized I would in my 30s, and I think I was excited to try to do that in the book.
Yeah, I do think a lot of the book, right? I'm also trying to remember my own early 30s, and I do think there's this question of like, how messy are we still allowed to be before this is just like not
I know,
cool
I love in
anymore?
some of these interviews I've been like, and now I have it like as if somehow like, and now I have everything totally figured out. Like this is a messy period and now I'm done. It's like, no, I still kind of like spiral and text my brother like insane things of like, what am I supposed to be like
Yeah,
turning on the oven? You know, it's like the craziest stuff.
but but I do feel like I don't know, 7 years ago, like being messy was not a well, you could be like, oh, this person's messy, and it
Yeah.
was a neutral
Yeah.
or even a good thing. And now I'm like, I don't think I would say that in a positive way about people, even who are our age, right? Like,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I
Yes.
might think it, but I wouldn't be like, oh, they're just kind of messy. That would not be a compliment.
No. Yeah.
So let me ask you, you were talking about as when you were interviewing and doing celebrity journalism, um, this sort of dichotomy between people's public selves and private selves. And I think I'm stealing this question from a really interesting interview, which I recommend to everyone, that you did with Interview Magazine. But you were talking about that idea of public and private, and it really does run through the whole book. And I think, I mean, it's hard to think, there's a lot of characters, and it's hard to think of any of them who aren't sort of grappling themselves with
Mhm.
who they are in private versus how they present in public. So, having now experienced that, it's through so many different people's eyes, did it lead you to any new sort of conclusions or thoughts, especially in a social media world where we all have a public persona, about this kind of tension between our private selves and public selves?
I think if I had a different kind of take on things now, having finished the book, having done this, I think I I want to say, but I don't know if this is true, that the kind of a sense of like, oh God, I was about to say enlightenment. I'm like losing my mind. But I think like there's a certain sense maybe of like contentmentness where you're not trying so hard to present a public self that's
Yeah.
discordant with your private self. I think I related to my early 30s period. I think in New York and maybe in DC as well, it's a little bit, stages can be delayed a little bit maybe. So in my early 30s, for sure, I was still in that period of like, this is what I want to present to the world about what my life is like. And people who knew me very well maybe probably did take screenshots and say like, when I saw Josh last night, I don't know, like I think there was like definitely a bit of that disconnect that I was maybe on some level even aware of and trying to kind of push. And I think now, and I think it comes with getting older, I think it comes with maybe like a certain sense of like where you are in your life or whatever. I hope that I do that as much. And I think most of my good friends don't either. Like I don't feel as much of that feeling anymore of like, oh wait, like this is what so and so was posting. Whereas like I do think a decade ago that felt like more of a universal
Yeah.
thing. Do you know, does that make sense? I don't know.
Well, I mean, in DC, no one ever postures. So, but I understand intellectually understand the
Yes.
concept.
Yes.
So I want to ask a couple of sort of writing-y, crafty
Yeah.
questions, and then at some point I think we're gonna turn over to audience questions. I've just
Phenomenal.
what time is it?
Hmm.
We're doing it time. Okay,
Oh,
great.
great.
So yeah, I'm gonna do a lightning round of craft
Love.
questions, and then we will turn it over to the audience. So I think you had told me that this was not the original title for the book. What was or maybe you told an interviewer, maybe it was interview Banksy.
This was not the original
What was
title.
the original title for the book, and how did you end up with this one instead?
So the original title of the book was Congrats on Everything, which I love as a title. I want to tattoo it on myself. I love it. Like I really do. I was very tied to it. We sold it with that title. I feel like, and I don't know if this is like the take you would have as well, but I think that it connotes a certain I don't know. It congrats on it has like a bit of a sardonic snarkiness to it, maybe, or like a bit of that energy. I think it plays more of like it plays up more the media kind of the transactional nature of relationships. Obviously, there's like the phoniness of the way we all say that to each other. By the way, now that it's like so many people say it all the time. I like my brother because he knew about this too as the title. I was like, once I like knew that was gonna be the title, like everyone says it to everyone all the time. Like you'll like be DMing someone you haven't talked to, like congrats on everything. It's just like what you say. But I do think, and my editor was the Early 30s was on a list that I had been brainstorming with my editor after it was determined that wasn't going to actually be the title of the book. I do think this title is really grown on me. I love it. I think it gets at something in the book that's there, and I think it's a good title, but it's a different thing totally.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's almost the number of times it's like an author wants a title that has many layers of meaning, and the publisher is like, we want a title that tells people exactly what the book is about. And I've been through and usually the publishers know titles, but I was anyway, I thought that was interesting. Let's talk about the cover. How did you end up? I like the cover. How did you end up with the?
So yeah, the cover, I actually think, and someone else has said this, not me, but I think also what I like about now the title and the cover in concert I really like. And my favorite thing about the cover is that they're not sitting on the couch, that they're sitting on the ground, but they're like up on the couch. It feels very like
Did you suggest any of this, or did they just come back and kind of?
Okay, so I will say that I don't know what your experiences have been for your books and their covers, but I think I was given a lot of like runway with like send us a PDF, send us ideas, send us like a document, and I was really taking it seriously. I'm like the least artistic person you've ever met, but I was like taking pictures like on the subway of like weird graffiti because I just was like getting inspired by different things. It was like insane to think about now. But I sent them this document. They're probably like, "What is he sending us?" But then I wasn't sure how I felt about the illustration idea. So no, this wasn't my initial, like, I want an illustration of the two people on a couch at all. I was going maybe for something a little more congrats on everything-ish, maybe a little more like an icon or something. And then they were like, let's see how you feel about this. And then I do remember the first time I looked at it, my editor was on the phone with me and he was like, this is a really like HBO after the episode behind I'm even like the crafting of the whole book. But he was like, let's hang up and you're gonna look at it and then call me back. Like, oh God, I'm gonna hate this because he like was like truly did not want to be on the phone with me while I was looking at it. So I was like really prepared to hate it. And then I looked at him like, oh, this is actually like great. Like I know, like I love the the color, like green was always kind of in the mix, and the one I feel like there was a few little like things we kind of played with her shoes, what was gonna be in between them. But I like the energy of like Marissa just came over. We have to get on the ground. We're ordering our food. Like they get the wine out. It's giving that to me, which I like.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna ask one last craft question, then we're gonna do audience questions. So, as a writer, what do you think you learned from this book? What was the something that either challenged you or that you came away thinking, okay, this is something I'm better at as a writer than I was when you started out writing it.
Oh gosh, I hate saying anything positive about like myself. I think I don't know. I think probably the thing that I'm excited about is that I finished it. Like I think honestly, like it was my parents are here somewhere in the back. They really know how there were moments where I was like, what am I doing? Like, it's like I'm sure you can relate to this. It's like such an insane thing to try to write a book. That sometimes, and I was saying this to you when we were in the green room, like it does feel sometimes like I feel like disassociated from it where I'm like, who did this? Like it wasn't me. It's like, I don't know if you guys watch Severance. It's like I feel like my like Audi wrote it or something. It's like this is not something I did. But I think honestly that is what feels so special and getting to share it now with people maybe if there was like one more like specific writing-ish thing, it was that sort of what we've alluded to now a few times, that I kind of took some paths with like the structure that are a little bit less, like just following some of the threads of characters and things, where I was like, this is what the book I want to do with my book. And like, it felt very like I would fight, like this is what I want. And like, I was never a fight. My editor was kind of amazing and knew what I wanted to do from the beginning, but I was like excited that I had this idea and I figured it out.
Well, it's very cool. All right, so we're gonna move to audience questions. I will repeat the questions for the Zoom people. And the only two disclaimers, questions rather than monologues would be appreciated, and also that questions should be questions. Those are related. All right, with those warnings, who wants to go first? In the back.
So
Hi.
I work with your dad.
Oh my God.
I can't even tell you how exciting it is.
How fun.
Finding an agent,
Hmm.
like feel like you benefited from having worked in the industry as a journalist. Is that
Mhm.
also, how challenging was it to get that connection in order to publish?
Yeah.
Oh, let me just hello. Finding an agent and an editor, and how challenging was it, and was it helpful to work in the media industry before you went about trying to do that?
Yeah, so my story was a little unique in that it was sort of related to my work at Vanity Fair. That my agent for this book, who I know David knows, Elias, who is wonderful, and I feel so lucky that we found each other to do this together. But he had read some of my celebrity profiles and reached out to me about just kind of the chat, and we were talking about maybe like a nonfiction book at moments, and we stayed in touch. And then when I was as I alluded to, when I had my personal essay moment and kind of was thinking about it, I reached back out to him. It had been a few years maybe since we had seen each other or chatted, but he had been kind of he had seen something I'd written. So I know that's a very like fortuitous thing to have an agent reach out to you specifically. But I definitely have a lot of friends who have done the like query. I mean, I'm sure you have, I mean, you can speak a little to this probably too, but like, I feel like there's like, it's a tough thing to try. I mean, I feel like finding that agent that you feel that vibe with, I feel like I've, in other, not for my fiction writing, but in other contexts where I've been looking for people to work with on things, it's such a like first date energy sometimes, where it does feel like, are we gonna see eye to eye on our art and the work, and kind of our like work styles, and it can feel very much like it feels like a date sometimes in that way.
Yeah, it certainly can. Okay, who's next?
So you're exploring something that's a little bit tied to your life now, and you've had that kind of fiction writing itch or the Blasio stuff. Do you have other avenues that you're already exploring and going down, or are you kind of taking a breather? Like, what are your thoughts these days?
I'm going to quickly summarize that question of sort of what's next in the writing life of Josh.
I like these summaries. I want you coming around with me like all the time. Like, where we go, it's just kind of like a quick synthesis of like what I need to like think about. Okay. I am working on a play and another book. I think it's been a little hard for me. We'll get vulnerable for a second. It's like this has been a very like, I've had a lot going on the past bit, so I haven't been able to like fully devote myself to my creative work, which I'm so excited to again. But the play, as I mentioned, I think maybe earlier on, did I mention that I've written a play? Yeah, I did mention I wrote a play. So I'm trying to write another play. I really like the like collaborative nature of working on theater and that sort of writing, and that was one of the most enjoyable experiences of my life when I wrote my play. And a fellow classmate of ours, Alex Trow, was the star of it, and it was just like a really wonderful experience. And she's now one of my closest friends, and so I kind of want to get back to that. And it's been really fun to work on. It's about a family, so it's a little bit different than this. And we'll see what happens with that. And then actually, I don't know. I think, and I want to give myself a little bit of time, but then I am excited to kind of start writing on something new. And I think, I feel like, I don't know, this whole process has been so fun, and it's really exciting now to have this out in the world. And it's made me excited to write more books, hopefully, if I'm lucky enough to be able to do so. So. Hi, Linda. This is my aunt, for the record.
Yeah. So Aunt Linda asks, um, do you know the ending when you start writing the book, or does the ending emerge as you're writing the book?
So in this case, I definitely did not. I did not have the like uh necessarily like exact scene in my head of it's gonna happen here and here's exactly kind of how it's gonna go. But I always knew. Oh, I don't want actually. I can't. I don't want to say too much for people who haven't read the book. But when you get to the ending, when you get to the last scene, it felt I always knew that's sort of where I wanted those two characters to have this last moment. I guess I can say this. I knew I wanted it to end with a moment of like, and my editor was also helpful for this. It wasn't quite nailed as hard as it is in the finished version as it was in the first kind of version, but like a feeling of hope or promise or like optimism. And I think that felt like something I wanted to do with this story. It felt like true to my life and some of my experiences with something similar to what Victor and Zoe were going through in the book. So I felt like I wanted there to be a sense of possibility maybe for the two of them. So I always knew like the emotional beat I wanted it to end on maybe, but I think when I got there and I was like actually crafting it, I think the contours of it emerged a bit later actually.
Hi, got to meet your cousin. I wanted to ask, like, aside from Victor and Zoe, like, which of the characters did you enjoy writing the most?
Okay, so this is which character other than Victor and Zoe did you enjoy writing the most? I think it just also says something that I was like, who did you hate writing? So I learned something about myself from this question as well.
We're all going to therapy. It's like a so I actually do have some of you have read the book. So Caroline, I would say actually is my answer for this. I think she's a very divisive character. I'd say like more than any of the other characters, people have like texted me or said things to me about like, oh God, like I didn't really like her. Or, like, and I kind of love that. I don't know again, like what this says about me, but like I just always felt that was actually one of the pieces, like her little short story in the book. And she recurs for in the way she overlaps with Victor, but her kind of like initial way we meet her, that chapter just is always kind of one. I don't know, just something about her. I'm kind of intrigued by her. I want to like, God, this sounds really crazy. I want to like learn from her a little bit. I think what she does is like doesn't think too much about anything, and she kind of finds herself just following the beat of like her heart, or like I don't know. She's just kind of like is doing things and not really quite sure why. And I'm so over analytical about everything and like so cautious. And I feel like there's something about writing for Caroline that made me feel like, oh, like this is what it's like when you can just kind of be like whimsical and free and like doing things and like not really thinking about the repercussions so much. And like, I want to do this. I don't really care what people think. So I would say Caroline, actually.
This might be off base. It seems like you're
Fair to say. What if I stood up and I was like, no, like, okay, you're out of here. No, yeah.
song or album
Mm.
really aligns with this.
Oh,
Ooh, okay. So-
synthesis. Yes. Okay.
Yes. Well, I mean, is there any? This is going to be a one-for-one synthesis. Is there any Taylor Swift album or song that really inspired you or that you listened to as you were working on the book?
Okay, so there is a song actually name checked in the book. And that song was important for one character moment, and like I always knew that was going to come up in that moment. So like I don't want to spoil what the song is. I'm being really spoiler cautious. I don't know. But there's a song that is mentioned in the book that comes from her second album. Let's say that. But I will say that someone asked me in a written Q&A that I haven't answered the question yet, but it just came into my inbox yesterday. They brought up, oh, this is actually gonna like someone should take my Swiftie badge because I don't remember is it Antihero oh no the weeds and little bit like everything's all my friends either have babies or smell of weed. It's like, is it anti-hero? Okay. But I like that lyric actually was really emblematic, and the interviewer was really smart to pull out that lyric because I was like that moment that she's singing about in that song from her most recent album like is sort of what it's about. It's like some of your friends are going through what feels like, you know, a very adult, you know, they're having building their families, etc. Then others are like smell like weed or whatever. So it's like, yeah.
How are we doing on time?
Another question here and at Zoom.
Ooh.
Oh, okay.
Zoom. Oh my gosh.
Um,
Is there a Zoom question?
Playwriting versus acting different.
Okay. Yeah.
We could do a whole nother 45 on this. I Would you have to?
I don't know. Do we need to summarize
Yeah,
the Zoom
do you-
question for the Zoom?
Okay.
Okay, going back.
You're so good.
yeah.
I'm in awe that you're able to do this.
All right. So, how was writing a novel different than the other things you've written? And also, and this, I want to focus particularly on this because I feel like we've talked about that part a
Yeah.
little bit. How about after a novel
Mhm.
comes out versus after a profile comes out, after a play is produced? This moment you're living right now, how is it different?
Yeah, I would say to me the biggest difference, and an editor friend of mine brought this up, so I can't use it as my own thought, but she was like, what's interesting about when you have a celebrity profile, my name might be on the cover of the magazine, it's still me, there's still me in the writing, I still can hide behind something. There's still something where it's like I'm writing about someone else. It's like, maybe you can be like, oh, this was a great profile or not as great profile, whatever. You can say things about my writing, but it's a little bit more about the person I'm profiling, hopefully. And I think this is obviously in an aftermath sense a very different sort of experience. It feels much more raw and vulnerable and naked and sort of like, this is all me. Like, if you like it, it's me. If you don't like it, it's me. It's like, so it does feel in that sense just kind of a more, I don't know, I don't really feel scared per se, but it does feel like a more you're kind of just opening yourself up in a bit of a different way.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest difference I've perceived. But I guess the flip side of that too is like it's a very special thing in a way that maybe some of my celebrity profile works, which I was also very proud of. It's not quite the same. I don't know. This isn't like they want my heart in the same way.
Yeah. And then one last question from the audience.
A lot of pressure. Come on,
Yeah.
someone's gonna do it. I
One
see a few of
final
you.
Amazing question.
No. Oh yeah,
Okay,
I
there
knew
we
it was
go.
gonna be you. I saw it in your eyes.
Ooh, good question. Okay, so this is our last question is about writing rituals.
Can you answer this too after I answer it? I'm gonna make
no,
you.
it would be, I'm not
Okay.
gonna end
Okay.
your
You're not
talk
gonna
by,
close the
with
whole
me
thing.
answering
All
a
right,
question
fine.
to you.
See,
You're
this
gonna
is
have
the
to answer.
problem of having interviewed people in my whole career. I always want to interview the other person. I'm like, this is so annoying to have to talk about myself the whole time. Like, no one wants that. Okay. But my writing rituals. So I would say that I used to be, I write late at night a lot when I was writing the book. And that was not how I used to always write, but I think there was something about, especially the first part of the book where my parents live in Boston. And when I was really trying to like get the raw material, kind of just in the cardio of it, I would do a lot of like, everyone in my family would be asleep and I would like stay up and try to write. And that was somehow like exhilarating or like made me feel like I was like in an old movie at a typewriter or something. So I think that felt romantic and fun to me. I don't others I just had a lot of crazy like little like OCD things about how to like get myself to just like get things together. But I think that was probably the late night was kind of my thing for this book. I don't know if it was like the most healthy way to do it though. And I don't know if I would try to mimic that now. I'm trying to be better at like getting up. Sometimes I read sometimes I read profiles of writers that are like, to wake up in the morning. But like to like feel like I like can write from 9 to 5. Like, and it's not like that.
Stuff. Well, okay, so that concludes our book talk. But where are we going to be? Yeah, everybody. Yeah.
First of all,
pause for applause.
And I want to thank David again for being such a phenomenal interviewer
my
and everyone
pleasure.
for coming out tonight. And Emily and everyone here for having me.
And are you gonna say all the housekeeping things?
I will finish up with the housekeeping things. Thank you, David. Thank you, Josh. And thanks to all of you for being such an attentive audience and our Zoom friends at home. Josh is kind enough he's agreed to sign copies. So we'll just take a minute to reset. We'll bring a signing table out here. We will line up heading back this way. And if everybody wants to help us out by folding up your chairs and just placing them along the walls, I will help too, but that would be a great assistance to us. So we'll reset for just a minute and then you can get your copies signed and you can buy more upstairs if you need to. Thank you all.